This is what I want Muslims to acknowledge in today's episode is that Allah does not require us to acknowledge that He is Al Khaliq, that He is Al Malik, that He is Al Basir, that He is Al Ghafur, that He is Ar Rahim, Ar Rahman. All of these qualities He has, yes. And throughout the Quran, He reminds us about all of His qualities because we have to know His qualities in order to love Him, in order to worship, truly worship Him. We have to know Him first. You cannot build that connection in Salat if you do not know Allah. And for you to know Him, you have to know all of His names and understand who it is that you are putting yourself in front of when you are going to worship Allah. And out of all of these names, the first name Allah Ta'ala wants us to reflect upon, the first name that He wants us to do tadabbur about is in the first line of the Quran. And it is Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. The first name that comes up in the first line of the Quran is Ar-Rabb. Now, Ar-Rabb means the master, the owner, right? And I want to first establish a connection and then I will inshallah build up what I mean by Ar-Rabb. And that connection is simply a teacher needs to have a student, a doctor needs to have a patient, and simply a master or an owner needs to have a servant. Through this relationship, we know that if there's a master, there needs to be a servant. And if Allah is calling Himself the master, the owner, then He must own something. And what is the thing that He owns? It is us, and it is all of His creation. But for creating, He has another name, Al Khaliq, the Creator. We're not discussing that. We're discussing the master-servant relationship. And when we acknowledge the name master-slave, actually master-slave relationship, we acknowledge that we ourselves are slaves of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Now, by definition, what is a slave? Who is a slave? You have to understand that a slave is a person who has no free will. A slave is a person who is under the direct commandment of his master. Whatever the master says, you have to do it, and you cannot show any emotion other than what the master wills. Also, your possessions are not your possessions, they are your master's possessions. This poses a few questions. Whatever is in our life, whatever we've been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our assets, our cars, our families, everything is given to us by Al-Malik, Ar-Rab, right? Because He's our master. We, being the slaves, have been given everything. We own nothing. So if Ar-Rab has given us something, Ar-Rab can take it away. And when you acknowledge this name, Ar-Rab, and you fully let it immerse in your heart, you understand the depth of when something gets taken away from you, you can just say Alhamdulillah. Shukr and Tarif is for Allah Ta'ala. Right? He gave it to me, He took it back. I'm not sad, I'm not depressed, nothing is wrong with it because it never really belonged to me. Such a great perspective shift for a Muslim. Such a great perspective shift for a Muslim. Wallahi, nothing will bother you because nothing really matters now. Master gave it to me, Master took it away. Secondly, if He is a Rabb, the owner, the master, and we're the slaves, we have no free will, then technically we shouldn't be following our desires, our hawa, as Imam Ibn al-Jawzi reminds us in the book Disciplining the Soul, that you shouldn't be following your desires, which he calls al-hawa, right? Because when you follow al-hawa, you're no different than an animal. And exactly why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us certain commandments to leash us leash us from going in the wrong direction. He is keeping us, He is protecting us, which is another one of His names. He is the protector. And so you have to understand the brilliance and the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words. Just the first line of the Quran, what He wants us to acknowledge is not that He is Al Khaliq, the creator. He does not want us to acknowledge that He is Ar Rahman Ar Rahim, that is the second line. He does not want us to acknowledge that He is Al Basir, the seer. He does not want us to acknowledge that He is Ash-Shafi, the healer. What He wants us to acknowledge is He is a Rabb. He is the Master. Just. O Muslims, brothers and sisters, just acknowledge the fact that He is a Rabb and you are a slave, and watch your life transform. Jazakallah.